And we are joined by Emily Cannel, who is on the line right now. A first for us, live from Japan. Emily, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I was busted for using Chopstick.
Oh, I know. That's what. When I first heard it, I thought, what? I know. Yeah. So Emily, first off, what has you living in Japan?
My husband's job got us transferred out here a few years ago.
I see. And so sort of a little bit like Lost in Translation, the movie, you're finding yourself facing a lot of cultural differences, and one of them would be the use of chopsticks, I imagine.
Well, funny things happen every day, and the chopstick use has got to be one of them. Absolutely.
So is that well, Patty, you can address this as well. Patty lived in Tokyo for how long?
About 6 months when I was in high school.
And
yeah, so you understand.
So is it the norm when you go to a restaurant that you would have to ask, like here we have to ask for chopsticks sometimes. Do you have to ask for a fork and knife, or how's that?
I remember, and it's been quite some time since I was there, so Emily, you can speak to this a little more currently. I remember it not being an option in a lot of places you could request, but you weren't necessarily going to get a fork.
Aha.
Yeah, you really can't get forks and knives here unless you're in a nicer restaurant that maybe even serves Western food.
I see. And yeah, because I imagine eating a steak might be a little difficult, with chopsticks. So, Emily, let's talk about the number one faux pas. And what would that be? What's the one thing that just...
No, there's actually two
Okay.
that I think are probably tied for the worst. And I'll start with the one that probably Westerners do the most often. And now that I live here, watching it makes me laugh, watching Japanese people watch Westerners do it. And it is when you open up the chopsticks and you pop them open and you sharpen them.
Aha. Yes.
You rub them together, right?
I'm gonna demonstrate for our online viewers. It's when you go like this. In fact, you can probably hear that through the mic, maybe.
Yeah. And it's the idea that you're removing the little splinters that might be hanging on the ones.
It's either to sharpen or to remove the splinters. And Japanese people don't do that because there really is no great, there's no big issue with getting splinters in your lip when you're using chopsticks.
Right. What are you really removing? I mean, I've never seen a big giant thing sticking off the end that would poke my,
that would
give
be
me
a danger.
A lip piercing, right?
No one gets rushed to emergency rooms with giant, pieces of chopsticks stuck in their lip.
What does it indicate, Emily, if you do that? Like, why is it considered rude or just not good behavior?
Well, it would be the equivalent to us of using your knife and fork incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just considered bad table manners.
I see.
Okay.
It would be like sticking your napkin in your shirt when you sit down.
Okay,
at the table.
That's a good. I get it.
That's a good example.
Right.
Okay. Now, the other thing that is considered really bad, and this is, we have no Western equivalent for this, is you always get rice when you eat a Japanese meal. And sometimes you'll see people, when they're finished with their rice, take their chopsticks and stick them upright in the rice.
Like using the rice as a holder.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You never do that. And the reason that you don't do that is because that is used in funeral rituals here in Japan. So a lot of the chopstick no-nos actually come from things that are used during funerals.
So it's okay to do some of these things, but only in a funeral setting. So when you're doing it at a restaurant, it's just bad taste.
Right, exactly.
I see.
So another one that's used during funerals is if you take a pair of chopsticks and you want to give food to someone else at your table, let's say you want to give Patty a piece of chicken from your plate.
I'm not sharing.
So you don't obviously know Randall. No.
Right. So you'd literally be passing chopstick to chopstick. Here, Patty, you need to try this piece of chicken, and I'm like reaching over to give it to her, and then she grabs it with her chopsticks.
Right. That also is something that you don't do. You would put it on another plate, and she would take it off that plate.
Okay.
Also, funerals, most Japanese are cremated, and there is a bone picking ceremony during the funeral, and the bones are passed chopstick to chopstick.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah. I did not know that.
Right.
Wow. Okay. And so what if I were to take one of my chopsticks and wanted to point out a menu item to somebody?
Have some of this.
Yeah, have some of this, and used it as a pointer.
Yeah, you never use your chopsticks to point out anything. So you don't point to the menu, you don't point to other people, you don't wave your chopsticks around.
And if you think about it, in Western culture, we wouldn't use our fork to indicate on the menu something that you thought someone should order. That would seem strange. So I guess that makes sense, right?
Nor would you point your fork at somebody unless you're like having an argument, I guess, which would be rude anyway.
Fork menacing.
Right.
Definitely not a knife, right?
Right, exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, keep all sharp objects out of the.
So no pointing with your chopsticks. Now, Emily, what about some people have trouble maneuvering with the chopsticks? What about skewering something or stabbing something because you're having trouble getting a hold of it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you don't stab things or skewer with your chopsticks. So if you, unlike in the West, where you would cut everything to a bite-sized piece, in Japan, it's perfectly acceptable for you to pick up something that's too big for you to eat in one bite. You can bite it off with your chopsticks.
Oh, okay, and then put the remaining part back on the plate.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can put your chopsticks together so that they, or the tips are together at a point, and you can sort of mash, if it's something relatively soft like a piece of fish, you can mash whatever that food is down until it separates. You're not supposed to scissor it. You're not supposed to take the chopstick in each hand and use them to separate the fish. But you can either bite that piece of food that's too big, or you can sort of mash it in half. Those are the two acceptable ways if something is too big to eat.
We're speaking with Emily Cannel. She's live right now in Japan. Are you in Tokyo?
Yes.
It's just live from Tokyo, and Emily has an online quiz you can take about chopstick etiquette. You'll do very well after listening to this piece, but if you're just joining us right now, I highly recommend it. If you go to eatdrinkexplore.com, under our program summaries for today, we have a direct link to her very interesting blog. I love reading it. And
really interesting.
Yeah, somebody tweeted how much they loved the test, and that's how I found it, was through somebody tweeting. Emily, how much of this is reserved for Japanese culture, where if I was in a Chinese restaurant, these things would not be considered rude, and how much of it is more universal?
I would say that most of this is universal. There's small differences in table manners between like Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans. But in general, the big things remain, like standing up chopsticks, in things like sharpening chopsticks, skewering.
Those are across the board. Well, Emily, we're going to let you go to bed because it's 1:45 in the morning there. And we really appreciate having you on the show. Emily Cannel with her online quiz. We recommend that you take it. And the link, like I said, is at eatdrinkexplore.com. Thank you, Emily.